coming through just a little
Yeah, could I just take it? My ex-PhD student.
I think we shall start now. Good evening, everybody. I'm Sabah Abdurrahman. I work for YUNUS. On behalf of YUNUS, I would like to welcome you all. Thank you for coming. Tonight's topic is about the calligraphy, basically about Sultans, Ottoman Sultans who were calligraphers. And our speaker, I'd like to introduce briefly our speaker, is Dr. Keskiner. He has completed his PhD thesis, Sultan Ahmed III, as a calligrapher and patron of calligrapher at SOAS, University of London in 2012. He published scholarly articles on the history of Ottoman calligrapher. Currently, he is working on the catalogue of the Shah Tamash album, as I pronounce
okay.
in the Istanbul University Library, together with Dr. Lale Uluç. Please welcome our speaker, Dr. Bora Keskiner.
Distinguished scholars, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. It's great to be here. It's a pleasure to see you all here. Thank you, Dr. Sabahattin Abdurrahman, for inviting me. Yunus Bey, you may dim the lights if you like. Plato is talking about the ideal philosopher king, who is rather difficult to find. The philosopher king is probably in history only one, and that is the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, probably. He is the only one. Then we have poet kings, who are more common in the West and the East. And then we have calligrapher kings, who are more common in the Islamic world, and especially in the Persian world. Before getting into the works of 18th century and 19th century Ottoman calligraphers, let me talk about the appearance of the calligrapher Sultan image. Yunus Bey. Huh, yeah. Can you help me with this? I would like to be independent. It was working a while ago. So, the calligrapher Sultan and a calligrapher member of royal household, thank you, appears to have happened in Central Asia during the Timurid dynasty, under Timurid rule. And the most important examples of this are by Sungur Mirza and his brother Sultan Ibrahim Mirza. Now this is from a very important album in the Topkapı Palace Museum Library. It's called the Workshop album, the Timurid Workshop album, and this is one of the rare examples of Baysungur Mirza's signworks. The importance of Baysungur Mirza and Sultan Ibrahim Mirza for the Ottoman calligrapher sultans is incredible because we know from literary evidence and other evidence that the Ottoman sultans, on many levels, they modeled themselves after the Timurid sultans, as poets, as calligraphers, as practitioners of other arts. So here we see بالشكر تدوم النعم, and here is the signature مشكه by Sungur أحسن الله أواكبه, which means here this one بالشكر تدوم النعم means blessings continue with gratitude. This one here is from the so-called Baba Nakkash album in the Istanbul University library. This is a short scroll by Ibrahim Sultan in Shahrukh. This is the colophon, and here we have a signature, Ibrahim Sultan bin Shahrukh bin Timur Gurgan. That's the great Timur. So he's Timur's grandson. Sana Asni Ashrin was Samanamiya, 822 Hijri. So these two works show us how the calligrapher member of a royal household, as a professional calligrapher, emerged. And these albums, preserved in this Topkapı Palace library, were studied by the members of the Ottoman royal family. We know that. I will show you how. Now here, this is the list of the Ottoman calligrapher sultans who can be accepted as professional calligraphers. Unfortunately, we don't have any signed works by Bayezid II, apart from some fakes. Bayezid II was the student of the famous Sheikh Hamdullah of Amasya, who died in 1520. And after that, for some reason, probably because the sultans were preoccupied with the wars and campaigns, they didn't have the time to practice calligraphy professionally. But as you can see here, end of the 17th century, in the 18th century and 19th century, as the sultans place themselves comfortably in the palace and leave attending the war, leading the wars actually, they have more time to exercise calligraphy and other arts. So here we see that, interestingly, the calligrapher Ottoman Sultan, as a professional calligrapher, begins with Mustafa II, who was terribly defeated and who was basically not in Istanbul but in Edirne as the capital was moved. And Ahmed III and Mustafa II lived in Edirne as their father Mehmed IV was hunting there. And of course that wasn't the only reason for the moving of the capital. And then both of them, Mustafa II and Ahmed III, studied calligraphy under the legendary Hafiz Osman Efendi, and not so much Mustafa II, but Ahmed III really became a remarkable calligrapher. And then, as you can see, until the last Sultan, Mehmed Wahid ad-Din, calligraphy became a family tradition. From father to son, it's quite remarkable. Now, before these 18th century, 19th century sultans, this is Ahmed I, who is the forerunner of the great masters, but he wasn't the most gifted of Ottoman calligrapher sultans. His naskh here is actually quite terrible, but the reason I put him here is because he signed his name as a professional calligrapher would. كتبه Ahmed Khan, Sultan Ahmed Khan, Imam al-Muslimin, the leader of Muslim people. And here he wrote all this text in this imperial album from the Topkapı Palace library. The text is Hadith of the Prophet, so he probably was trying to gain the divine blessing from transcribing the sayings of the Prophet, which was a common act. People believed that transcribing the sayings of the Prophet as well as the Quran was a source of divine blessing. He was terribly pious, and he was the builder of the famous Sultan Ahmed Mosque in Istanbul. Now this is Mustafa II, and here something very interesting is happening. With Mustafa II, calligraphic panels are becoming commonplace. Before Mustafa II and before his teacher Hafız Osman Efendi, it isn't common. There are, in certain sources, there are mentions of certain calligraphic inscriptions put on panels and hanged, but this is one of the earliest calligraphic panels to have survived. This is almost a pre-Hilye, the verbal portrait of Prophet Muhammad, and with the names of the Khulafai Rashidun, the righteous caliphs and members of his family, and the signature is here. This is a Muhakkak Bismillah, located in the Hagia Sophia Mosque in Istanbul. The Hagia Sophia Mosque, of course, is probably the most important monument in Istanbul, and it was called the Mosque of Conquest, Fetih Cami. It represented the Ottoman conquest of the city, and not only Mustafa II, but other Ottoman sultans, as we will see, they all composed beautiful calligraphy on panels, and they located these works in a certain corner in the Hagia Sophia Mosque, which I call the Calligrapher's Corner. This is in the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate. This is again Mustafa II. Do not despair of the mercy of God. He was quite talented in Jeli Thuluth script, which is understandable because, as I said, both him and his brother Ahmed III, they studied under the famous Hafız Osman Efendi. Now here, this is Ahmed III, the champion of Ottoman Sultan calligraphers. He was the most talented. He executed many panels. He transcribed the whole Quran. He composed 2 calligraphy albums. He used, unlike his brother, he appears to have used calligraphy as a tool of propaganda. As the Caliph Sultan, he placed some of his calligraphies in the biggest mosques of Istanbul, and even out of Istanbul, for the audiences of the mosques to see as a message from the ruler, from the Caliph, from their leader, which is understandable because this is the stage when the Sultan is becoming, instead of being the classical Sahib al-Sayf, the owner of the sword, he is becoming Sahib al-Kalam, the owner of pen. The ideal, of course, is for a ruler, Sahib al-Sayf al-Kalam, the owner of sword and pen together, but it rarely happens. This is again Bismillah by Ahmed III. Unfortunately, many of these panels are in the Turkish and Islamic Art Museum in Istanbul, but where they were brought from wasn't always recorded correctly. So this one is again in the Turkish and Islamic Arts Museum. Another Bismillah. This is the pear-shaped signature of Ahmed III, Ahmed bin Mehmed Han. You will see better photos. And this is a Sulus Bismillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Now this is a very interesting and very beautiful example. This actually shows us that he was not only following the traditional Ottoman path, but he was visiting old masters, and here I mean the Timurids, because the Timurids were great masters of mirrored scripts. This is a mirrored inscription. So basically this side is a reflection of this side, and it's rather unorthodox because usually the legible half is on the right and the illegible reflection is on the left. That's 90% the case. But here he was a very creative man, a great master calligrapher indeed, and probably his source for inspiration was Timurid calligraphies in the albums preserved in the Topkapı Palace Library, which he studied, we know. How do we know? Because most of these very important Timurid and Safavid albums bear his imperial seal. So we know that actually he handled them, he examined them, he probably studied them. There is one interpretation that during the removal, the collection of the manuscripts from various rooms of the palace to his library, which he built as an individual standing building in the palace, that is the Library of Ahmed III, it's called, 3. Ahmet Kütüphanesi in the Topkapı Palace in the third courtyard. All important manuscripts dispersed in various rooms in the palace. They were collected in the library, and some scholars say all these manuscripts were sealed with the imperial seal of Ahmed III as an inventory, which I do not really, I'm not too sure about that. This is a Jalisulus Tawheed, La ilaha illallah, Muhammadun Rasulullah, and again the pear-shaped signature. Unfortunately, these photos were better, but I think because of the blow-up thing, it's not that the same quality anymore. This is very interesting because you can see that the European influence is already there. And as you will see with the other political sultans, it will come to such an extent that calligraphy will be the only art safe from European influence. And that probably is the reason why the Ottoman royal family, they considered it as a family tradition, as of course the caliphs as well, and the leaders of the Muslim people, at least in the borders of the empire. With this incredible westernization, they must have seen calligraphy as a haven. This is, again, you see, this is the same actually composition, but this one is traditional, the illumination. Here is the pear-shaped signature. The framing calligraphy is Nastaliq. It's a poem in Turkish. Sultan Ahmed III composed himself. It is in his diwan, and it is in praise of the Tawheed. This is another Jalisulus panel. Here again, Ahmed bin Mehmed Khan. This is the dot of the Kha. فَأَعْلَمُ إِنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. This is from the Devati Mustafa Türbesi. Well, it's another one of the pieces where Ahmed III, I think, was trying to give a message to the people visiting the mausoleum. Here again, the Western illumination, and I don't know if the frame is from the period of Ahmed III, but that also doesn't really look very local. Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakeel. It says again, emphasizing that the ruler of the Ottoman state is the legitimate ruler, because for him Allah is sufficient and he is the best disposer of affairs. Again, I think this is the same, yes. Here he wrote it in Soothing, here in red ink. Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakeel. And here we have another meaningful quotation from the Quran. God is the best guardian, and he is the most merciful of those who show mercy. This composition will be very much favored, and it will be copied by his grandsons and great-great-grandsons. We will see a few examples. Here we have a Jalisulus panel. Interestingly, this was written in white ink, but because of the cracks, it looks like it's actually black. If you look at the signature, this is how the original looked. It says فَتَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ, and then al-ahsanu al-khaliqeen. So, thus blessed be God, the best of creators is here. The reason this is squeezed in this box, I really tried to understand, and finally I found some compositions in the Timurid albums in the Topkapı Palace library, where similarly the Sulus phrase is divided into half, and the first is written large and the second is squeezed to the upper left corner like this. I couldn't find that particular example to include in this PowerPoint, so sorry I can't show that to you. And Najat fi Sidq, again, salvation is in truthfulness. So it seems like he is trying to, because it's in the Turkish Endowments and Calligraphy Museum, and most of these calligraphies there today were collected from various mosques and mausoleums in Istanbul. I think that this also was in a mausoleum or a mosque, and therefore this is again one of these works where the Sultan is trying to extend his worldview and give a message to the people. So these calligraphies basically help him to strengthen his image as a legitimate ruler, as a caliph, as a sultan, because the empire is crumbling. I think this is one of the main ways the Ottoman calligrapher sultans were able to consolidate their status with. This is a very interesting one, Muhammad al-Hadi, and the Ya is in the form of the Zulfiqar, the pointed sword of Caliph Ali. So here actually there is an interesting connection made between Muhammad, and although Ali isn't mentioned, this Zulfiqar detail is stressing on the fact that there was a very close relation between Ali and Muhammad and Prophet Muhammad. And actually it is, if I may say, a bit far-fetched for a Sunni caliph to put this, so to make this composition, because it somehow puts Ali and the symbol of Ali above the name of Muhammad, which is a very interesting thing, I think, for any historian who is studying Shia and Sunni symbols in Ottoman art. This would be a very interesting example. Now this, thank God, is in the Shehzade Mosque. I saw this. It's there. It hasn't been moved to any museum. And it says, obey the commands of God in order to become his obedient servant. So again, emphasizing the fact that one of the main things he requires is obedient people. And here we have Ra's al-Hikmah Mahafatullah. The beginning of wisdom is the fear of God. This is an ancient saying I've found out. The ancient Greek for this is Archisophias phobos Kyriou. It's identical. It means the beginning of wisdom is the fear of God. So it's an international phrase, and it appears in Arabic as well, and it was used, it was written by the Sultan as well. This is now very interesting because here I found this, I couldn't resist putting this here. This is Hafiz Osman, his teacher. And you can see how he basically duplicated the compositions he liked from Hafiz Osman Efendi. This is إنه سميع الدعاء. Here, Azaf Ibadullah, Azaf al-Ibad, Ahmed Ali Osman, Ahmed of the Ottoman household, the weakest of slaves, very humble. And here it's quite clear, I think, that he quite liked this composition. And he took it from this kata where you have the Nask section below. Undoubtedly, Allah, of course, God is the all-hearing, and He hears prayers. This is the Calligrapher album, his Thulus album from the Topkapi Palace Library. This one is very interesting because here he says, كتب هذا الجريدة نمكه ابن الشيخ. So this is basically copied from an album by Sheikh Hamdullah, the famous master and teacher of Sultan Bayezid II, who passed away in 1520. And what he did here was to show his mastery in Thulus. He took this album by Sheikh Hamdullah and he duplicated it, he copied it, and at the end he mentioned his name, and then he says Sultan Ahmed al-Salis, Ahmed III, Ibn Sultan Mehmed Khan, Akram Allahu Walidayhi bil Gufran, and the date. So he wasn't timid about even copying the most important and legendary calligrapher for the Ottomans, of course. That was Sheikh Hamdullah, not for the rest of the world. Now this is a beautiful comparison, I think. This is from the calligraphy composed by Sungur Mirza, the Timurid prince, for his mother's mosque, for the Gawharshad mosque in Mashhad. And this is the colophon of that calligraphy by Sungur bin Shahrukh bin Timur Gurgan. A similar approach can be seen here, where Ahmed III composed this panel, Al-Jannatu tahtu al-aqdam al-ummaha, paradise is under the feet of mothers. And he placed this exactly like Baysungur Mirza did, to his mother's mosque, to the mosque of Emetullah YUNUS Valideyn Üsküdar in Istanbul, and it's still there, the panel. And now, interestingly, I really like this couplet. This is from the Diwan of Nedim, the court poet of Ahmed III, where he praises the calligraphy of Ahmed III, and he makes this comparison with Baysungur Mirza. Eğer şehzade salgur sağ olaydı ana derdim, bunu seyrede de var ameni eşkeste paile. If Prince Baysungur was alive, I would say to him, look at Sultan Ahmed's calligraphy, go snap your pen in two and throw it away. So his image was quite alive, I think, Baysungur Mirza's. This is the opening page and the flyleaf of the famous Baysungur album in the Topkapı Palace Library. This is the Shamsa, with the name of Baysungur Mirza, and this is an incredible album containing the calligraphic works of Yaqut al-Mustasimi, the great Abbasid court calligrapher, who worked for Abbasid Caliph al-Mustasimu Billah, and who died in 1298. And it opens with the calligraphies of Yaqut al-Mustasimi, and the text it opens with is very interesting. It is the Lamiyat al-Arab by Shamfara al-Azdi, a pre-Islamic poem, which is rather awkward. And then his students. And here we see Ahmed III's seal on the flyleaf. And as I said, I take this as a sign of his interest in the album, and that he actually saw it, studied it, examined it. This is from his library. This is the library, the Topkapı Palace. And this is the panel he put in his library about basically why he built it, and his wish for the intercession of the Prophet. His signatures here. This is from the public fountain in front of the imperial gate of the Palace. Tarihi Sultan Ahmed'in cari zebanı luleden, aç besmeleyle iç suyu, an Ahmed'e eyle dua. This is the second public fountain in Üsküdar. And this one, the chronogram was composed together with his beloved vizier, Damat İbrahim Paşa. So it says, dedi Han Ahmed bile İbrahim tarihin, su vardı alemi deste Muhammed'le Cevadullah. It's very beautiful, the meaning. Yeah. Through Muhammad's hand, God's generosity watered the universe. This is another chronogram from the Mosque of the Rahman, which he restored. Sultan Ahmed gave life to the Dervish Lodge of Unity. Here the Dervish Lodge is the city of Istanbul, because Istanbul was called many names, Constantinople, Istanbul, but also it was called Asitane, which means the Great Dervish Lodge. This is the Hall of the Mantle of the Prophet in the Topkapı Palace, where he sealed both sides of the door with his tugra compositions. These are his names, his titles. And this is the Tawheed above the entrance. And it's very beautiful, I think, that his tugra signature is just under the word Allah. So he is basically in need of divine protection and grace. These are the tugras, his tugras in the Chancery Hall, Kubbe Altı. Again, signed with a signature. So he appears to have sealed the whole palace with his calligraphies. Here, this is the entrance of the third courtyard, and again, Ra's al-Hikmah Makhafatullah, at the beginning of wisdom. And then here, this is above the entrance of the Chamber of Petitions, which was the heart of all diplomatic relations and discussions. So almost everyone after his reign who entered this chamber must have admired the beautiful calligraphy. I don't think this lady knows anything about the calligraphy. This is the Tugra of Ahmed III. He himself composed it most beautifully. Actually, before Ahmed III, Tugras are rather shabby, and probably because of his personal input, after Ahmed III, they become more and more beautiful. This is the Tugra album. 10 Tugras, 2 for the Prophet, and the others are the titles of the Sultan, and the last 2 are the signatures. This is the most beautiful, the Tugra of Prophet Muhammad. It's from the Qasida al-Burda of al-Busiri, the Egyptian poet. Muhammadun Sayyidul Kawnayn wa Thaqalayn. So he composed this in Tugra form, and actually what he did was he united the name of the Prophet with the Ottoman royal monogram, which I think is an excellent way of uniting the strength of Islam over people with the signs of the state. Again here, Baysungur's calligraphy on tiles and Ahmed III's calligraphy on tiles. Another similarity. And at last, Mustafa III. He composed Nastaliq only. He isn't really recorded as a calligrapher sultan. This one I came across in the Turkish and Islamic Art Museum. Another calligraphy by him, very beautifully signed with a togra on the corner, Persian poetry. And Mahmud II. This is the Ottoman Omphalion, the point where all Ottoman sultans were enthroned in the top of the palace. And just above that, he wrote the Bismillah, and this is his signature, a very beautiful signature. The Mihrab verse, again by Mahmud II. It is rather difficult to think that the perfection achieved in Mahmud II's works could be his genius only, because it's incredible here, the balance, the proportions. This was, many calligraphers say, in Istanbul, they learned this from their masters and they from their masters, that Mahmud II actually used to ask his master Rakim Efendi to correct his work. So it's should be considered as Mahmud II and Mustafa Rakim when we look at his works. This is Mahmud II, and as I said, this is Mustafa Rakim. So you can see that in some cases he actually copied the composition. This is Mustafa II. This is the calligrapher's corner in Hagia Sophia. This is Ahmed III, Abdul Majid, and Mahmud II. This is Abdul Majid now, Mahmud's son. And this is Abdul Majid as well. Here, this is very beautiful because it's the same verse. This is Ahmed III's, this is Abdul Majid's. basically influenced by his great-grandfather, probably. Again, Abdülmecid. كتبه Abdülmecid bin Mahmud Khan. And these pear-shaped signatures are getting more and more intricate and beautiful. This is the Mecidiye Mosque in Istanbul, where Abdülmecid did something very interesting. He wrote all monumental inscriptions of the mosque himself. So Allah Muhammad, Osman, Abu Bakr, Omar, Ali, the caliphs, Hassan, Hussein, and here is his pear-shaped signature again. This is a Persian verse by Abdülmecid in Nastaliq script. Khas ke Mecnun asir silsile boşad. Again, Sulus Naskh calligraphy. And this is very beautiful because it still shows us the messages going on. Sayyid al-Qawm Qadimahum. The master of a nation is the one who serves that nation. That's probably him. Then Abdulaziz. This is the only calligraphy I know of Abdulaziz. This is a sign of humility because he wrote the ayah, وَمَا أَنْتَ عَلَيْنَا بِعَزِيزٍ. You are not superior to us, in which his name at the end appears, Aziz. And this is the sad, petty ending of a glorious history of calligrapher sultans. This is the last Ottoman sultan, Sultan Wahiduddin. And this is the only calligraphy I know by him. It isn't original at all, and it was probably inspired by this composition, which dates before his reign. And this is very common composition. It's basically gathering the letters under the Sufi headgear. So the reason he did this, I think, is because he was a great Sufi. He was a man of letters, he was an artist, he was a canon player, he was a musician. And he wanted to put his name and other sacred names under this Sufi headgear. He was a dervish of the Gümüşhanevi Dervish Lodge in Istanbul. And with this work, I think the great tradition and history of the Ottoman calligraphers comes to an end. Thank you very much for your patience, and thank you for listening to me.
Dr. Keskiner, thank you very much for your fascinating presentation. We will have now a question and answer session.
Yeah.
So you can take all these questions. Please raise your hand and I can bring the microphone to ask your question if you have a question.
Don't be shy.
Thank you very much for that.
My pleasure.
I was just wondering, was there any evidence of the wives of the sultans being calligraphers?
Why some of the sultans?
The wives.
The wives?
Yes, of the daughters of the
Yes.
sultans. Were they, have you found any evidence of them being accomplished calligraphers?
Not in the Ottoman household, but I think the Safavid household, yes. Qajars, yes. Mughals, yes. I can't think of any Ottoman princesses, calligrapher Ottoman princesses. But there are Ottoman lady calligraphers, and excellent calligraphers. There is Esma İbret Hanım, who was Mahmud Celaleddin's wife, and some say his calligraphy is superior to Mahmud Celaleddin's calligraphy. And Mahmud Celaleddin was no extraordinary calligrapher. He was Sultan Abdülmecid's calligraphy tutor was Mehmet Tahir, and Mehmet Tahir's tutor was Mahmud Celaleddin. So Mahmud Celaleddin was the, if we can say, imperial pedigree. And İsmail Hanım, Mahmud Celaleddin's wife, was and still is considered superior to her husband.
So next question, please.
Can you just show us on the slides again and show us
Yes.
how big the pieces are? The size of the pieces?
The size, now that was troubling me because some of them I could find, some of them I couldn't. If you like, I can show you. Now this I don't know. This is really a panel, so I really wouldn't know. Many of these calligraphies are panels, okay? And they are roughly this big. They are never, oversized. They are never too small. When they get small, they are called qita'as. And qita actually in Arabic from qata, it means the piece that is cut from somewhere. And for some reasons, I could never find a calligrapher in Istanbul and elsewhere who could tell me what that qita was cut from. Because when you say qita, it means cut from somewhere. It's a piece of calligraphy. But they never know where it is cut from. And that's, a topic of another talk. Anything else?
Any question? Any comment?
Thank you, Doctor, for your presentation. I just wanted to know if, for someone who goes to Istanbul, is there any recommendation on a website or some sort of literature where you can follow a trail of all the different calligraphy that's out there?
Follow?
Like a trail, to see the different calligraphy with the information.
On the web there is Kalem Güzeli, a Turkish website, which is really good, I think. Many examples of calligraphies. And you can actually follow the master-student chain. Apart from that, books. There are very nice publications. You can find them at SOAS and downstairs in the library. I just saw some. They are very good. Lately, since 1980, there has been some great publication work going on. And there is a book on Hafız Osman, collected almost all